Welcome back to Inquiring Minds. My name is Doug, and thanks for joining me for another Pen Resurrection Sunday on Inquiring Minds. I've got a number of vintage pens waiting in the pen morgue for a second life, and some of them have been waiting for a long time. But even though I just got this 1946 Parker 51 Vacumatic on eBay recently, I'm anxious to get it on the slab in the lab because this gold cap was so tarnished and black, and the barrel and section were so deeply scratched and scarred. I wanted to show you how relatively easy it is to get a pen like this looking and working like brand new again. So here is what it looked like when it came out of the bag from eBay. So what I have here today is a 1946 Parker 51 Vacumatic in black with a gold-filled cap, and it's in decent shape. I'm going to say it's decent shape because it looks rough. All the way around looks rough, and that's why I got this so inexpensively. I think I paid around $70 for this on eBay, and it's because it looks pretty awful. It's all black and a little fleck of blue left in that diamond. The cap is dull. There's a slight dent right there, and the barrel is all scratched. See the scratch marks there. So let's triage this pen. I know from previous experience that all this black comes right up because that's all pretty solid gold. Not solid gold, but gold filled anyway. And it says here on the cap, 1/10, 16 karat gold, filled, made in the USA. We have Parker down the clip. This is the diamond, blue diamond clip, top finial. We'll see if we can get that clip off, and maybe I can move that clip around to here to cover up that dent. Blind cap comes off, and there's no sack in there at all, but the spring is working, so we'll have to take that apart. Let's take the cap off. You can see the section has some really deep gouges on it here, like someone tried to use pliers to get this section off. You can't do that, but the nib looks like it's in really, really good shape. That's probably a fine, but it might be a medium. We'll have to see how it writes, but we can polish this whole thing up. Gold center clutch ring, and there should be a date code here somewhere. There we go, 0.6 point. So 2 dots and a 6, that means the second quarter of 1946, Parker 51, made in the USA. It's very faint. So I'm going to have to polish that barrel up. I'm going to take some 400 grit sandpaper to get those gouges out of that hood. But this is going to be a really nice fountain pen. First order of business is to get that Vacumatic pump out of there and then heat that section off as well. I'm going to put this in my ultrasonic bath with some pen flush for 5-10 minutes, something like that, to get all the extraneous ink out. And actually that pen flush, which is 9 parts distilled water and 1 part ammonia, cleans up some of that gold very nicely. I wouldn't put it in there for a long time, but we'll put the whole pen in the pen flush, and you'll see that that gold will come up a little bit after that bath and get some of that oxidation off of there. And now this is what it looks like, all shiny and new and resurrected. Now let me show you how I got this pen from this to this right now. I stuck the collector and the nib unit in the pen flush to flush that out. Now we're going to get after that Vacumatic pump with our Parker Vac extractor tool from the inky nib. What do they call it? On the Vacumatic pump unit. And clamp it down. And I might as well give it a turn to see if it works. Well, Might not need to apply any heat at all. There we go. That one didn't require any heat. But it's stuck in there, of course, so we'll get this out. There. And we want to push that out from the front. Use a small rod to try to push the rest of that out of there. All kinds of crunchy sack inside. If we pull it from this end, it's going to snap that celluloid rod off of there. So I really want to push it out from the inside. Now, instead of forcing it, I think I'll soak that a little while. While I'm soaking the pump mechanism in the electrosonic bath, this is right out of the bath. It still needs some cleaning, the collector, but I think we can get that nib off of there. And the breather tube looks in pretty good shape. So let's pull that breather tube out. There we go. And let's separate that nib from the collector. There we go. And the feed doesn't want to come out. Oh, maybe it does. There we go. There's that ebonite feed. The collector can soak for quite a while and get the rest of that old ink out of there. But let's take a look at the nib here. I can't see it on camera, so I'll use my loop here. So this says Parker, made in USA, RUPL on the one side right there, and 1946 on the other. And it looks like it's in really good shape. So we could probably soak that a little bit more, but I'm going to put it on my polish cloth to see how well it comes up. And one little trick I like to use is to cut the tip off of a cotton swab. And that usually fits right inside that nib, and that allows me to hold on to it a little bit better to give it a polish on the cloth. There, give that a little bit of a bend. Shining up very nicely. This nib slit is cut slightly off center. You can see that dot right there, the breather hole, and then there's the circle dot, and that slit is slightly off center. But these were hand cut, so you didn't have the precision of a machine. It was a hand done operation. I'm going to use my guitar string here on the breather tube just to scratch out any old ink, and then put it back in the ultrasonic bath. It's good to clear the feed of any obstructions as well. Make sure that little hole right there is clear. So after much pushing with my knockout rod, it finally popped free. Now there's probably a lot of old sack and debris in there, and that pump is in pretty good shape. There's remnants of that sack right on there. We'll clean that off, and we got to get that pellet out of there with the Dremel tool. I put my eyes on for this. Now we'll scrape the rest of that old sack off of that leading edge of the pump. That was easy. Now we'll take some test tube cleaning brushes to the inside of that barrel to get it nice and smooth and clean. So I put a bit of Pensbury Manor Penetrate Pen Potion number 7. Say that 5 times fast. And put a few drops on the end finial of that clip and let it soak a bit. And we'll put a piece of paper in there to protect the rest of the cap from this spinning. And I'm going to try to use my rubber gripper turn this clip a little bit to loosen that end finial. It's moving. Yeah, there we go. It was too tight for me to try it the first time, so that penetrate really works. There we go. And there's the end finial. It's a brass one with the plastic top. And there's our clip. So we can polish that up. And we can get at the cap to polish it up as well. Now if I had a clutch puller, I'd be able to pull that out of there and get that cap seal out of there as well and clean the whole thing. But I don't as of yet. We'll see if I can get one of those in the future. But with this will polish up very nicely, I think. So I'll let that soak a little bit more now that that cap seal is loose. And we'll go at this and this with some metal polish and then with my jewelry polishing cloth. Most of the blue diamond is gone, and so I have some of that paint, so once this is all cleaned up, we'll fill that diamond with some blue paint again. Some Autosol metal polish liquid and some elbow grease. And that's just after a couple of minutes. I'll let it sit a little bit longer and polish it up some more to get some of the little bits of corrosion out of the edges and the crevices. But that's looking pretty good. Let's see how it does on the cap. Look at that. Decades of grime and tarnish. And that's after a couple of minutes of that metal polish. And of course it will shine up even better with a jewelry polishing cloth. There. I'll probably polish it a little bit more. I might buff it some to get some of those micro abrasions out of there. Put my test tube brush on the inside to clean that out. But that's looking very nice. Nothing is more amazing than gold. It can go so many years of dirt and tarnish and then come up in just a couple of minutes like that. Isn't that amazing? So now I've put the pieces back together again so I can go at the hood and the barrel and the blind cap with some flexible 400 grit sandpaper and hopefully get those gouges out of there. Those are pretty deep, so I'm going to have to go at that pretty vigorously, and there are some teeth marks and so forth. I'm going to try to avoid that imprint as much as possible. It's very, very faint right now, and I've got all the pieces together so that I don't get any rounded bits. And that seam in the blind cap remains almost invisible. So I've gone after the entire barrel and section with 400 grit flexible sandpaper, and I've gotten most of the scratches out, all the bite marks out. I've avoided the imprint right there, but the hood has revealed some stress cracks. I don't think they go through, they're just sort of just below the surface, but I can't sand down any more to get at it. It'll just keep getting worse. So I'm hoping that once it's polished up, it won't be that noticeable. And I don't expect there will be any leaks through there anywhere. That's fairly thick. So now I go through my Micromesh pads from 1500 through 12,000 and get it all shiny again. And then I'll follow up with some rubbing compound and some polish. Okay, so I've been through the Micromesh and it's looking pretty good. And I'm going to follow up with some rubbing compound, which is my Meguiar's Swirl Remover number 2. And finish up with a polish cloth, microfiber soft cloth. And there it is, looking almost brand new. Those fissure marks are still there. See, there's like stress cracks. But fortunately, I have another black plastic hood. It's on there just perfectly and is scratch-free. And I'll probably go at this with some finer grit polish as well, the clutch ring back on, and we're ready to install the diaphragm on that Vacumatic pump and reinsert the nib. Now we can put the nib, feed, and collector and breather tube back together again. Slide the feed into the nib, and we're going to get it aligned just like that. Polished up that ebonite feed. Hold it, and we line it up with the large slot on the bottom and give it a little bit of a push. I think that's lined up correctly. Looks pretty good. And then we can put the breather tube into the feed, and we put the whole kit and caboodle into the barrel, and we give it a try. It won't line up correctly. The nib turned around on me. So I'll try again. Slide that in all the way. There, and we're 180 degrees around. I'm going to mark with my thumb right there where that point should be to get it roughly in the right place. Yeah, worked perfectly. Okay, let's replace this diaphragm. I've got a new diaphragm, which is a Deb size. All Parker 51 Vacumatics are Deb size. And we put it on our pellet pusher from the inky nib, and it has a little ring right there that measures where I need to cut that sack. Push it right up against that pellet, and then feel for that notch. It's a handy little tool, saves all the measuring. There we go, just about right. And then we push it into the Vacumatic cup. I'm going to put a little bit of talc on that latex to allow it to slide back on itself. Oh, I haven't got it all the way in. That's what she said.
That's what she said.
Put it all the way in. There we go. Now we should be able to roll that sack back on itself here properly. This one's not cooperating. It's rolling like a cuff. There we go. Every one of these is different. Everyone wants to be a real pain in some way or another. And we slide it onto that shelf. And I'm going to put a little silicone oil just to lubricate the edge of that cuff so it slides into the barrel just right. There we go. We don't want it binding in there as we turn this. Now I can take this off to inspect. Now I've marked this, little scratches right there, so I know where it goes next time. So I can pull that out, and I can inspect my work. Let's put the vac extractor collet on there. Helps it turn a little bit better. Yeah, I'm going to put a little bit of silicone oil right there too. This is binding a little bit. There, that's better. And just go hand tight. We don't want to crack that. It should be working. I'm going to have to get my light. So I've had two issues with this pen since I re-diaphragmed the pump. That diaphragm I put in would not stay put in that cup. So the cup has been widened so much that it won't accept the pellet. You can get replacements for these. You just pull this one off and screw a new one on or glue a new one on. But I haven't got those. So I had another pump mechanism that I put into this pen. It has a slightly different stem on it with the black top, but it's roughly the same era, and this one works just fine. The second issue I had was this replacement hood is Chinese, and the opening right there, maybe you can see it, is slightly smaller. The threads are the same, but the opening is slightly smaller, so it wouldn't accommodate that nib. So I put the original section back on with its flaws. There's a couple of flaws there that you can see. It's not too bad. You'd have to look for them. So I've got the pen all back together again. And the next thing I want to do is to paint that blue diamond on there and then let that dry and then test this nib. In fact, I think I'll test the nib right now. And I'm just going to dip test it with some Waterman Serenity. I noted when I inspected that nib that it was cut off, that the slit was cut off center, but that should not affect the writing. And it looked like it was in fairly good shape. So let's see. 1946 Parker 51. I'd say this is a fine nib, 14 karat gold. It's very smooth with some good feedback. Of course, no line variation to speak of. You don't get that out of these nibs. That's not too bad. It's fairly dry. Try it with a little bit more ink. Yeah, there we go. It was dry because it had run out of ink. There we go. That's very nice. So now let's find out whether it fills with ink. And the first thing I like to do is to measure the weight of the pen without ink. It'll stay on there. 9.6. Press tear. I hear bubbles. That's good. Just keep pumping until I hear no more bubbles. And we put it back on. That was not 17.3. It was 9.6. Let's try this again. So now I have to do math. Now it was 9.6, now it's 11.6. 2 milliliters of ink. Not too bad. So here I have my Testors blue paint, and it is Testors, it's really hard to find, there we go. Testors GI Dark Blue, number 1111. And that is the best match to the blue on these Blue Diamond Parker clips. I got my tiny paintbrush, and I'm going to overfill. Let's get in close here. And I'm going to overfill that Blue Diamond so that it runs a little bit over those edges, and then let it dry for quite a while, probably a couple of days, and then polish it off with my polishing cloth. And it should take the enamel off of the ridges, but leave it in the crevice. That's what happened last time, and it worked. And I've got my eyes on as well to make sure that I have a really good close-up. I've attached my cap here with a little bit of stick tack to my work surface. And just drop a bead of paint in that diamond, and now just let it sit there. And as it dries, it will go concave. So what are my thoughts on this resurrection? Well, this was very satisfying. I got the pen for way less than what it's worth because it was so visually filthy and tarnished, and it wasn't even in working condition. I look for pens just like this on eBay, and I was excited to get this one. The steel-capped or lustraloy capped 51s clean up okay, but there's nothing like these gold-filled caps from the 1940s. They're so well made, and I love this deco-styled blue diamond arrow clip. I've painted that diamond, but I've not polished it down yet because it's still relatively wet. It's going to take another day or so to dry fully before I go at it with a polish cloth to get that diamond to show up. The section and the barrel polished up nicely, even though the imprint is fainter than it was previously. The Vacumatic pump came out with a lot of hassle. It unscrewed without any heat, but the pump was stuck in there pretty tightly, and it took some extra effort to force it out. I was afraid I might crack that barrel, but again, these 1940s Parker Vacumatics and 51 Vacumatics are very sturdy and well built. As it turned out, the pellet cup on this pump was too wide to accommodate a new diaphragm, so I had to swap this one out for another spare that I had. So that rod is different than the original pen, but it all works nicely now. That nib slit was cut off center, but that isn't unusual, and it hasn't affected the nib's ability to write a very nice, smooth, wet line. And overall, this is a beautifully writing Parker 51 from 1946. So there you have it. I'll let you know soon whether I'm going to part with this pen or not, but I'm going to write with it for a while first because I'm really enjoying it. I might just keep it. If you look at my Wix page, which is linked in the description below, you'll see what pens I do have for sale. And there you have it. As always, thanks for watching.
I made this.